And presenter details and the slides will be made available afterwards, so please don't panic. There's no need to do screen captures or anything. We'll send all that out afterwards. Just a bit of instructions on how to interact with the webinar. Down the bottom of your screens, you should see a whole bunch of buttons. One of those buttons is a chat, although I'm not sure that's there these days. You don't need to worry about that. There's another raise hand button. If you could maybe click that button just to let me know that you can all hear me and everything's working okay. Fantastic, great. Haven't been talking to myself for the last 5 minutes. And the third button is the Q&A button. So as our presenters are presenting, please do send your questions into that Q&A box. It doesn't disturb them while they're presenting, so feel free to send in questions as they're going. And at the end of their presentations, I'll run a Q&A session with them and get those questions answered for you. Right, so I'll introduce each of the speakers as we go. We've got three really good speakers, and let's start off with our first speaker. So Dr. Chris Stokes has been working at the Centre for Automotive Safety Research since July 2014. He originally graduated from the University of Adelaide with a degree in Civil and Structural Engineering, and then with a PhD in Civil Engineering in 2014. Chris's research is heavily involved with progressing and disseminating safe system understanding. Chris is the course coordinator and lecturer for the final year traffic engineering course at the University of Adelaide, which contains a heavy focus on teaching safe system principles and practice. Chris is also a member of the Centre for Automotive Safety Research Crash Investigation Team. Thanks, Chris, and off you go.
Okay, thank you, Jamie, and thank you everyone for attending and listening to our talks today. So I'd just like to point out, firstly, I am in an office that sits right over a laboratory, so if there are any background sounds, I do apologise for that. Today, I'd like to talk to you about aligning road network safety ratings with the safe system. So before I get properly into my speech, a little bit about myself. So I'm a research fellow at CASR. My main research areas of interest are around infrastructure. So I look at things like evaluating infrastructure, the macro modelling of infrastructure, and some investment modelling of infrastructure. Bit of an overview of my presentation. So I'd like to give an overview of the mechanics behind the road network safety rating systems, and I'm going to focus on the widely known iRAP model, mainly because that is the model that I know the best. Then I'd like to give a bit of comparison with crash statistics, both in terms of the mechanics of how we use them and their usefulness. And then finally, I'd like to wrap it up with a bit of discussion around the benefits and the limitations of road network safety ratings. So a little bit of an asterisk first. I am an academic. I do tend to sit up in my ivory tower. I'm not a practitioner who uses these systems on a day-to-day basis. So I have a perspective of them, and I'll present that perspective today, but I don't know everything there is to know about them. So first up, let's just start by talking about what are road network safety ratings. And at a very broad level, they're a proactive measure of safety, which means that we can now go out and look at the level of safety on the road before any crash is happening, or without having to wait for crashes to happen first. So they're directly relatable to the road environment. Those are the inputs that we use to run the models. And they're indirectly related to the outcomes of road use, which are in our case, the crashes that occur on the road and the harm that occurs. So what do I mean by this? Well, as I said, road network safety ratings are directly related to the road environment. So that can be things like the geometry and the infrastructure on the road and the general environment around it. And those are the inputs that we put into the model. Then there's an implied relationship to crash outcomes. So what we're really saying here is that for a certain road environment, we expect there's going to be a certain level of risk that we're going to get crashes or a certain amount of harm occurring on the road. So how do they work? Well, they're a points-based system, and so this means that for all the different road environment attributes that we have, we assign some scores to them, and then we essentially just add up all of those scores to give us a risk rating on the output. They're loosely based around crash modification factors, and for those of you who don't know what a crash modification factor is, what it basically does is tells us, say, for a intersection where we might expect 10 crashes to occur in any one year, if we have a CMF for a type of treatment, here I'm representing as a roundabout, let's say that CMF is 0.3. And what we're saying is we expect there to be 3 of those 10 crashes still occurring after the treatment's in. So in other words, we've reduced the amount of crashes by 70%. And in terms of the road network safety ratings themselves, so generally they work as a higher score equals a lower star rating, which is a worse outcome. And it's one of the many benefits of road network safety ratings is that they're a very easy to understand output. Of course, anyone can understand that if we have 1 star, that's worse than if we have 5 stars. So in terms of how the model mechanics run, we have a lot of road attributes, and these are road attributes around the road environment. So they could be anything like the geometry, such as your curvature, down to the infrastructure, such as the amount of delineation or any barriers or anything that we have in there, and also down to the general road condition. And what we'll do is we'll assign a score to each one of these based on the prevailing conditions in that section of the road. From there, we'll get a score for the likelihood that a crash will occur, that the severity will occur, and that can include measurements of speed. And we can also then input exposure into the mix as well. And what we get on the output is a score for each crash type. And for these models, we look at the general crash type. So whether that's a crash in an intersection, a lane departure crash, or a crash with, say, a vulnerable road user. So I'd now like to give a little bit of a comparison to crash statistics. So if we firstly look at the road safety ratings, the road network safety ratings themselves. So as I've said, they're proactive, which means that we don't need to wait for crashes to occur first. And they're deterministic, which means that for certain inputs, we know what the output is going to be. There's no random variation, there's no chance in there. And that means they're independent of variation. So we do know that for a certain input, we're going to get a certain output all the time, and we don't have to guess at what those background variations may be. And this is because they're dependent on the road features alone. So while that's a good thing as well, it's also a downside that we're not picking up anything else except for the road environment. One of the real benefits, though, of road network safety ratings is that they can be applied to new or existing roads. And in new roads, that also means we can apply them to roads that have had a major change that's occurred. Crash statistics, on the other hand, they're reactive. So as we all know, we need to wait for a crash to occur before we can actually look at the crash stats. And they're probabilistic. And what I mean by that is there's always chance in the outcome that occurs. So for a certain road environment, there's nothing that guarantees that we're definitely going to get a crash or we're definitely not going to get a crash. It's really just down to the level of risk. So if there's high risk, you're more likely to get a crash, but it's not a definite outcome. This means that crash statistics are susceptible to variations, and quite often it can be hard to determine whether those variations are due to actual changes in the environment, say the road environment itself, or whether they're down to random or background effects. A benefit and disbenefit of crash statistics is they are affected by other factors. And so this can be really good because we can start to identify other things that may be attributing or may be attributed to crashes occurring, not just the road environment itself. But it can also be rather bad as well because we find it hard to determine between whether it is an outcome that's been affected by the road environment or whether it's because of something else, such as the behaviour of road users on the road, or even, say, the proximity to pubs and how many drunk drivers there are on that road. One of the other big downsides of crash statistics, of course, is that we have to wait for crashes to occur. So they're only applicable to existing roads, and really only to roads where there hasn't been any recent major changes that have occurred that could change the level of risk on that road. So I like to think about crashes in terms of the iceberg model. So crashes and harm are really just the tip of the iceberg that stick out of the water. So they're the outcomes of risk. What we miss with crash statistics is the inherent risk that exists on the road. So this is the potential for harm and crashes to occur that may not have yet occurred. So some of the benefits of the road network safety ratings, so they're very informative and easy to understand for non-experts. And so when we keep it at that star rating level, it's very easy for someone to realise without being an expert that a 1-star road is not as good as a 5-star road. But they're also useful as a design tool. And the reason for that is that we're inputting all of these design features into the model and we get some sort of safety rating on the output. Some of the real benefits of road network safety ratings, because they're probabilistic, they're deterministic, they're not probabilistic, is that we can identify risk on the areas of road where we don't, say, have crash clustering or non-black spot locations on the road. And this means that we can start to assess the road network at a route or area-based level so that we can look at the effects of, say, mass action treatments. Now, I like this analogy as another way of showing the benefits of road network safety ratings. So what we have here are the risk mountains. So we have a lovely countryside and some mountains in the background. Unfortunately, today it's a bit of a cloudy day and all we can really see are the snow-covered peaks of those mountains. And we can think about that as those black spots, so the clustering of crashes that occur. And that's what we see with crash data. What we don't see is the underlying terrain that's being hidden by those clouds. Road network safety ratings are great because they take those clouds away. So now we can see that risk landscape that happens underneath. And the real benefit of this is because crashes are probabilistic. So they're down to chance and risk. And so we can see with these mountains, there are higher areas and lower areas, which are your higher risk or your lower risk. And so we don't need to wait for a crash to occur first because it's had that outcome of risk where the crash has occurred. We can simply look at that there's some higher risk in a certain area, so it's more likely for a crash to occur, say, compared to another area of the road network. Another real benefit of road network safety ratings is that as we've gotten better and better over the years at minimising the number of crashes that are on the road, we start to lose that clustering effect. So it becomes harder and harder to locate those areas of very high risk. So now we're looking at something that looks a bit more uniform in risk over the network if we're just looking at the crash stats. Of course, with the road network safety ratings, we can turn that into a risk for the whole road network. So we can again start to pick up where there might be differences in risk along the different roads. On to some of the limitations of the road network safety rating systems. So essentially they are a points-based system, which means that there are many ways to achieve a high star rating. And with the multitude of different combinations, there are thousands and thousands of ways to achieve a similar star rating. Some of these ways are well aligned with the safe system. So if we think about having a country road and we put a median barrier in the middle, that's pretty well aligned with what we think in the safe system. Some are less well aligned. So you can still achieve a fairly high star rating by having a wide median, but we know that we're going to get some full excursions over that wide median or the wide grass median. We're also likely to get some high severity rollovers, so it's not as well aligned with the safe system. So as a bit of a comparison, risk ratings are a points-based system, which sits a little ajar with the safe system. So in a points-based system, we attribute points to all the different attributes on the road and we get some sort of score. With the safe system, it's more related to a hierarchy or a benchmarking system where we say that there are certain attributes that must be in there. So as a bit of an example, let's say we have a 70km/h or above roadway, a country road somewhere, and we want to look at helping to fix the problem of head-on crashes. Well, we can put a median barrier down the middle. If we look at this in terms of the road network safety ratings, the risk rating that comes out is a score where the median barrier is just one of the attributes that's weighted in the total score. So it means it helps to give us a good score, but it's not necessarily required to get a good score. On the other hand, in safe system thinking, we say we must have a centre barrier down the middle to reduce the consequences of those crashes. So median wire rope safety barrier seen as a primary treatment, and we say, and this is really for all different models, black box type models. Sorry, I'm getting your connection is unstable up there. Jamie, am I still being heard?
Yes, you did drop out for a second, but you seem to be back and okay now.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know what was missed there, but just one of the other limitations of the road network safety ratings is they are a black box model, and like all black box models, this means that we have some sort of input that we put in and then we get a result out in the tail end. But we tend to treat them as a black box model, so we're not really looking at what's happening in the middle. The risk here is that we're expecting it to be representative of reality and what's really happening. Now, we've gotten better and better at making these road network safety rating models more reflective of reality, but it doesn't mean they're always going to be an exact reflection of reality. And so we've got to be mindful of that. So in conclusion, road network safety ratings are a really good tool that we have and one of the best proactive tools that we have. But like trying to fix a car with just a spanner, it's not going to work as well as if we use all the different tools that we have in the toolbox. And we've got to be mindful of that. Road network safety ratings are just one of the many tools that we have. We also need to be critical of the outputs that we're using for, especially for design. So as I said, they can be viewed as a bit of a black box model, but we've got to be aware of what that model is doing so that we can critique the outputs and so we can know if something unusual is happening and why that might be happening, not just taking it for granted. And we also need to consider these models alongside leading practice in road safety, such as the safe system and other road safety principles. And make sure that when we are designing using these types of systems, or we're using them as an input to design, that we're still aligning well with the safe system. So just as a bit of an end and a bit of a segue, here at CASR, we supervise PhD students. So we do a lot of research, and part of that is we like to supervise PhD students. So if you're in the audience and you are an undergraduate student, or you've just finished, or you just want to do a PhD, then come talk to us. We're always looking for new PhD students to join us. So thank you for listening to my talk, and I'll put it back to you, Jamie. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chris. A really good overview of the safe system road assessments there. Please Members of the audience, do send in your questions now while I wait for those to come in. I've just got a question of my own. Chris, do you think it's realistic to expect that we have 5-star rating on all roads, or is it more appropriate to have specific roads that have high star ratings and others that have lower star ratings?
That's a really good question. Of course, if we try and aspire to 5 stars on all roads, then that's going to cost a lot of money, or we're going to be reducing the speed limits down to levels that the community just may not accept. I think what's more realistic is to try and achieve 5 stars on those roads where we have the highest exposure. So where we have a lot of people using them, and then we need to build up those other roads over time. So it's not always going to be down to the road environment itself. There's going to be other factors in the mix. And of course, vehicle technology as it's coming in these days might well be one of those solutions for those roads that we can't bring up to 5 stars with the amount of investment that we can put into the road network. The other thing that I'd just like to say there is that 5-star doesn't always mean that we're going to have harm elimination. So we may, but it's very expected still that on a 5-star road, we will still get some level of harm that's outcoming from that use of that road. So it means that just because if we had 5 stars over the entire network doesn't mean that it's fully aligned with the safe system.
Right, thanks, Chris. We have a question from Rob who asked, does a roundabout increase the crash rate but decrease the death rate? And vice versa, do traffic lights decrease the crash rate but increase the death rate?
That's a really good question. I think that's a really succinct answer that you've given, Rob. And in essence, yes. So roundabouts can reduce certain types of crashes, but they can also increase other types of crashes. What we generally see are those high severity crashes are the ones that reduce. So if you see, say, a crash modification factor to a roundabout that is very low, that's probably an indication of the injury crashes that are occurring there. On the flip side, yes, signalised intersections. There's a reason why we see more crashes there than other types of intersections, and that's just purely down to high exposure. I would expect that a signalised intersection, if you just went and put it into an intersection that previously did not have signalisation, without any other changes occurring, so no changes to the amount of vehicle flow going through there, you'd definitely get a reduction in the amount of crashes, so it would reduce likelihood. The big problem, of course, with signalisation is a red light doesn't physically stop someone going through. So a big problem that we still have at signalised intersections is running red lights. And even though that's a fairly rare event with the amount of traffic going through those intersections, it does become all too common an outcome.
Okay, so another question from Scott who asks, is the relationship between star ratings and crashes linear or exponential? So is it more important to eliminate the 1-star stretches or raise the 3-4-star stretches to 5?
I'll start that by saying I don't know whether it's a linear relationship or an exponential relationship. So I couldn't comment based on that, but I would say that we want to look at the type of road that we're targeting first. So star rating is one side of it. The other side is the exposure that's on those roads. So if we had a 1-star road that has 500 people travelling it down it each day, we're going to see a lot less harm outcoming from that than, say, if we had a 1-star road where we have 10,000 people using it each day. So in terms of which roads we target first, I think that's still a bit of an open question that we need to answer in terms of whether we target 1-star roads first to bring them up to 3 stars or 3-star roads to bring them up to 5 stars. In terms of what roads we target, I think though we need to target the high exposure ones. I will just say though, in terms of the mechanics, which gives a little bit of an answer to your question there, is that as we go up with each star rating, we halve the risk of a fatal or serious injury crash occurring. So essentially a 2-star road is half the risk of a 1-star road, and a 5-star road is half the risk of a 4-star road.
Great. So we've got a few more questions, but I'm going to have this as the last one. We might be able to have a whole bunch more questions right at the end, but this one's from Kim, who asks, Chris, what do you consider the best contemporary introduction to safe system principles?
Oh, that's a bit of a hard one there. The best contemporary introduction. So in terms of teaching people the safe system, I think what we really need to drill down into is that it's a change in who's responsible for crashes. So we're no longer saying that it's just down to the road users and that they have to be responsible on the road. There is a duty of care that system managers have. And they need to really respect that duty of care as the primary responsibility of stopping crashes from happening. So crashes will still occur. We just need to, as system managers, be mindful and be making sure that we're always putting in best practice to reduce the risk of crashes and harm as much as possible. I think the other side of it is that we really just need more education in this space and more consistent education. And I'll use this as a bit of a plug for one of the projects that we've been doing with Vic Roads, which is now Road Safety Victoria. And it's an education platform called Safe System for Universities. So if you look at the Victorian Road Safety Education website, you'll see that on there. And this is aimed at tertiary students, so engineering students, and teaching them about the safe system and what it really means as their responsibility as a traffic engineer.
All right, fantastic. Thank you very much, Chris. We'll move on to our next speaker. So Russell King is the acting manager at the City of Prospect and has close to 20 years experience in local government, working across a number of areas such as stormwater, roads, traffic, asset management and construction. He has a passion for innovation and improving the infrastructure council provides to make the world a better place. When he's not in the office, you'll find him stopping pucks at ice hockey or travelling the world with his family, just not in 2020. Okay, thank you, Russell.
Hey guys. So yeah, really my presentation follows on a bit from Chris and some of the theories and some of the points he was getting across. And being council-based, what I was hoping to kind of give you is a perspective of if you work for a council or state government, or even if you're a consultant advising a council or state government or body, just some of the practical ideas or some of the barriers you might have, even that particularly for councils that run, 80–90% of all of Australia's roads, they're some of the, you can really focus for improving the road safety. And some of the barriers, I mean, we're a bureaucratic beast, and so knowing ways you can do it or simpler ways you can simplify things so that you can still get outcomes. So yeah, I'll give you a bit of an idea of like a strategic approach kind of we've applied at councils before, and how you can develop a bit of a simplified risk rating on a budget, and then just as well how you actually then get those risk ratings into actually something in practice and how you can actually program to deliver them. So So I suppose from my perspective, it was always, I suppose a lot of people know me for like asphalt or stormwater, other things, but I'm also quite passionate about my road safety. And I think it was at one stage, some seminar I went to where they were asking a whole lot of people, like, what's your current road toll? What do you think it is? And then have a guess. And they say, what do you want it to be in 10 years' time? Most people would say, oh, maybe half or like 30% or so. And then they'd ask like, well, what do you want the road toll to be for members from your family or your friends or the people you work with? And really who's going to, unless you've got a really horrible mother-in-law or something, everyone's going to answer zero. So for me, kind of either everyone counts or no one counts. So what can we do to make that road toll zero and casualty crashes zero? And so being from a council, and this was something we applied when I was at Adelaide Hills Council as well, but you can use the same approach, is that, well, what we're finding is that there's really good black spot programs and details for how you can target, you know, you've got more than 3 crashes at one location, you can go fix it up, but really you're just fixing one spot and one type of event, whereas like just pulling up a random crash map of crashes in Victoria, you can see really it's just a scattergun plot. You've got those dots all over the place, and it was thinking about, well, you know, we might not know the exact bend or the exact kind of down to the 10-meter stretch of road we've got, but what we do know is the type of crash people will have. And we do know that if it's a rural, it will typically be a roadside departure and hit a fixed object like a tree or down a creek or a stobie. And if it's metro, it's probably going to be at an intersection, and it's probably going to be right angle crash. So what can we do to target those and start to reduce the risk of those across the whole network so that we get that scatter plot down? And so the other thing from a council perspective is that eventually every single road, we're going to be there doing some form of intervention from an infrastructure perspective. So most councils, if it's a rural road, we're probably going to be there every 15, 20 years to do new spray seal and shoulder and other treatments. Or if it's an urban road, we're going to be there doing the intersection, doing the curb, doing some other bits every 25 years or so. So from my perspective, it was like, well, if we're going to start to target this kind of the type of crash rather than the location and the scatter plot, how can we also start to like link in that, well, what do we do first, or at the very least, how can we get it so that every road we come and do something at, we don't just do like for like, we look at how we can improve it and how we can improve the safety on that road. So working in from, I've got a fair bit of a background in asset management, and so that was something that I thought, well, let's integrate it with our asset management plans. Why should it be just about the pure asset base, and we're there to provide a service level to the community? And I would say that most people in the community would like a nice smooth road to drive on, but they'd also like a road that's safe. So really we should be there to meet that expectation that we're providing a safer environment. So what we worked on is that, well, if you wanted to develop a simplified risk model, like let's face it, like no one's got a lot of money, your client or the council you work with probably got lots of money to maybe build a roundabout, but not so much for doing things like this. So we thought, well, how can we maximize what's the data that we've got, and how can we use that to develop a risk model? Like maybe we can't afford to pay a consultant to go out and come up with some really awesome scheme and drive every road. So what can we use? So thinking about, well, what data do most councils have? Pretty much every council is going to have speed data. They're going to have road width. They're going to have the condition of the road. They'll have the number of properties, details of the lighting, signage, the shoulder width, and everywhere will have an aerial photo as well. So how can we use some of that data? Most of the like GIS people in councils, they love this kind of stuff. They can collect this data, add it against any road you want to. We thought, well, what other data could we get that maybe, again, isn't as intensive? I mean, we've all got Google Street View, or if you're working with a council, it's easy to like just drive around. And so maybe we thought, well, what about we just get someone going around, work experience student, and driving each road and just picking up, you know, how many hazards were there in the clear zone? And it doesn't have to be, you know, 20 here, 23 there. It could just be high, medium, low, depending on how close the trees are and how many there are. Are there any side obstructions at the intersections, fence, hedge? Stand on each corner, have a look. what does it look like? High, medium, low. What advisory signage is there? What's the gradient of the road? Is it steep coming into an intersection? Any problems like that? And so again, these are all things that are really easy to get, but all have a bit of an impact on what's the risk of the road. Similar to like what Chris was saying about picking up the data. And so sorry if this seems overly technical. It's supposed to just be an example, but again, showing that how simple it was and the system we put in place at the hills and that we're trying to do at Mitcham and anywhere else is that, well, if you've picked that data, it's just finding a bit of a risk score. Like, how would you get your 1 to 5 star rating? And how would it apply that? Yeah, you could just pick up, well, we know that for us, some of the high hazards or the risk on our network is definitely those roadside hazards. We've got lots of trees, we've got lots of people speeding on the bends, and we've got hardly any shoulders. And how if you apply that over every single road where you've got that data, again, you'd have most of that. The roadside hazards are easy to pick up. And then you could start to come up with a bit of a score. And then say for this one, if you said example road Crashville 3.9, remember if you've got that for not just the one road, but you've got that for 100 roads, you can then start to rank those roads and get a bit of priority system, and then even just group them so that you've got a 1 to 5 rating as well and give them a 1 to 5 star rating. And so you could do that within a month, wouldn't cost you $1 million, and at least gives you something to just have a more strategic approach for why one road would be better than the other or what you could do about it. And so the other thing is that asset people, if you play to their weaknesses in that everything they're looking at and the data they're looking at is what's the condition of the road or the condition of a curb or a condition of a footpath on the 1 to 5 rating. Well, the same if you've got a 1 to 5 star rating, you could start to, other than that it's in the reverse where 5 would be bad, 1 would be good. So if you start to make things on a 1 to 5 rating as well, and then integrate that with your asset data, again, asset people, GIS people, it's very easy. If you've got a 1 to 5 score for every single road, they can just add that onto their data, and then you've got condition data and you've got a road safety data on a 1 to 5 score. So then how do you apply it? We've got a 1 to 5 score. Let's just, let's do it. This is where the rubber hits the road, and I've seen in a few places where maybe we'll get risk rating scores or we'll get an indication of roads we need to do something on, but then it just gets forgotten about. Whereas that's what I'd like to really hit home is that talk to your assets people, talk to your GIS people, talk to the people who do your road seals and say, how can we start to integrate this into our programs, and how can we get the 1 to 5 score we've given the road, which is just as important as the condition? How can we start to look at targeting that and addressing that? So what we looked at doing is saying, well, let's come up with a very simplified way of working out of a generalized treatment, and what that allows us to get is a generalized cost. So you could say, if you had really complex data and you had heaps of time, you could say, start going through each road and finding, well, all the ones we scored a 5 for roadside hazards, we need a guardrail. We know guardrail's $400 a metre. Well, we know that road's 83 metres. We can go work out a bit of a rate that if we wanted to target it, this is what the cost would be for a guardrail or advisory signage. Or if you're time poor and it's been a hard enough battle just getting a 1 to 5 score, again, you've got the rates for the length of road and the metre. Just come up with a rate and say, well, we know to fix a condition 5 road, the worst, it might be $20 a square metre, medium, $5 a square metre, and if it's low risk, $1 a square metre. And what's important there is what we can start to do is then integrate that with our asset planning. So every council's got a long-term financial plan. Every council would have an asset guy who's going through every single road and the unit rate it is and the cost that would be, and they'd be able to tell you, we're doing this road in year 3 and it's going to cost $48,000. If you've got that risk score built into your business as usual, and you know it's a condition 5, and I know it's about $20 a square metre to put in some interventions, I will put in some pavement markers, some curve advisory signs, some better lighting, then you can start to factor in that, well, yeah, in year 3, to when we go in and renew that road, it's $40,000 to do the asphalt seal, but we've also allowed $8,000 to just do some remedial works and safety improvements. So then you start to integrate it into your budget process as well, and that it's there. You're not having to do budget bids for individual discrete spots or apply for funding. You know that each year you're going to be there when you come in, renew that road that's on the edge of a cliff. You know, you'll come in, we've got budget, we've got scope to put in guardrail, to put in lighting, and then just start to get it done. So that's all from my perspective. I know we've kind of flown through it there, but certainly happy to discuss it with anyone or go through in more detail how we came up with it. So just let me know anytime.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Russell. I think it's a great practitioner perspective that, you know, accounts for the financial and labour constraints of all this kind of stuff. Please do send in your questions. I'll kick off with one. I guess it's maybe the bane of local government, but do you think it's worth accounting for the views of the residents in your, I guess, your risk ratings?
Well, yeah, it's, I suppose there's the two things. It's whether they think it's a risky road versus, yeah, even whether they want some treatment. We've found typically in some of the rural or semi-rural areas, they're more matter of fact that the road is the road. It's been like that 80 years. My dad used to drive it. What's the problem? Whereas some others will be quite passionate about it, that you've got a 4-metre drop off. We need to do it, something about the guardrail as well. But I'd say that it would be warranted, kind of, whether it's like a whole risk factor, but whether you're just adding in that, you know, I mean, if you've got 10 residents that live along the road and they know some of the problems or the behaviour of the way people use the road, I mean, they're there every day, they're there on the weekend, they're there at night. I would kind of factor that in as important, how you put that intangible in there. It could be subjective and factor it in, but I think it is important to take in their views and that local knowledge. I mean, certainly we found at the Hills, we'd have lots of crashes on some of the roads where, you know, it's just a P-plater or a young driver in their rubbish car. They've just come round, dinged it into a tree, like backed up, left a bit of the bits of the car there, and then just kept driving because the car is almost valueless anyway. So you get this pattern where some roads would have 5 to 10 crashes on them, but you'd only ever have one reported or where someone wanted to actually put in a claim. So that helps mop up some of those riskier roads that you might miss otherwise.
Yep, great. We've got a question from Rob, who I think has some suggestions for some clever remedial actions. He asks, could you grow succulents, bushes or pad around Stobie poles to widen the impact area to gain the best out of vehicles controlled collapsing as opposed to the cheese cutter effect?
Well, yeah, although I don't know how many of those succulents and other things, there seem to be, I'm not a tree or plant guy, but it seems like half those things that you would put in the verge before now are like a weed or not allowed, and they want you to take them out. So maybe it would be a good idea if you found one that was sterile maybe and didn't spread its seeds.
Okay, yeah. Lots of things to take into account, yeah. So Phil asks, he says, thanks, Russell. Re your points about 85th percentile speed over. Is this over the speed limit, the design speed, or safe speed based on risk of serious injury?
Oh, sorry, yeah. I would say, I mean, if you've got the data and you had info on the design speed, that would be even better. But I was working just more on the general, that, you know, it's an 80K road. If everyone's taking it at 90, 95, that could be a big flag, given particularly if you've got bends on it or something. But if you had the better data where, yeah, it's an 80K road, but we've got about 10 tight bends with an advisory speed of like 45 or something, that then, yeah, you could then target that, well, people are taking this road on average at 60 or 70, and it could be a target. So hopefully that, yeah, answers the question. But yeah, so I guess you can apply anything of the data that you've got.
Yeah, so it's a case of use what you've got, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a lot of encouragement for a local government perspective, but not too many more questions. But please, if you do think of more questions, please send them in, and we might be able to get Russell to answer them towards the end. So we'll move on to our final speaker for today. So Martin Small has been working in road safety since the late 1990s. Formal positions held include Chair of the National Road Safety Management Group in New Zealand, Director of Road Safety and Registrar of Motor Vehicles in South Australia, and Director of ANCAP. He currently runs his own road safety and regulatory management consultancy and is a Director of the RAA, the FIA Aligned Mobility Club of South Australia. He was first elected onto the ACRS Executive Committee in 2016, then elected as the Vice President in 2018, and is now the President, first elected in 2019. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Jamie. Are you showing me how to share my screen here? Oh no, just a moment. Sorry, apologies. Just getting up now. Is that all okay?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. Thanks very much, Jamie. It's great to follow on from Chris and Russell. Both very interesting and useful contributions, and lovely to be here with everybody else on the other side of that screen. So, the Australasian College of Road Safety, our vision is the elimination of fatal and serious injury. We support our members to eliminate serious road trauma through knowledge sharing, professional development, networking, and advocacy. This presentation is the last of those, the advocacy. And what I want to talk about is transparency, safety, and infrastructure safety star ratings. And the reason I want to do that is that the college has called on the Transport and Infrastructure Council, which is the council chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister, Michael McCormack, and all of the transport and infrastructure ministers around the country in Australia, to immediately commence work on 2 national initiatives as part of the upcoming National Road Safety Strategy. We want the Commonwealth to publish consistent infrastructure safety star ratings covering occupants, pedestrians, cyclists and motorcyclists in easily consumable form on behalf of all governments. And we want them to prepare and begin implementation of a 3-year infrastructure safety investment plan and a 10-year national safety investment budget to achieve 2030 infrastructure safety star ratings. And what I'm going to do this afternoon is talk to you about why. Why did we send that letter to the Deputy Prime Minister at the very beginning of June? One reason for it is transparency. It's not known to people in Clare, Port Augusta, Port Lincoln, Robe, Mount Gambier, about the safety of the infrastructure they're using. They're being denied information about the safety of the roads they use. Information which is very easily gathered and very easily published by road authorities. Why do we call for that? Because we think that safety star ratings are an essential means of engaging with the community about major safety issues that they face on the roads they use and have paid for every day. What safety star ratings do is provide critical input into good quality investment decisions. So you can be very clear about where it is that you are going to spend public money to improve the safety of the road. And of course, with that comes accountability. It also allows good quality policy decisions to be made, such as if there is a limited supply of funding, what are the other options? What are the policy options for doing something about the safety of that road? Performance management. Over time, the safety star ratings can track and monitor and track progress that a road authority has made in improving the safety of the infrastructure services that they provide road users, consumers, and taxpayers. And of course, safety star ratings are absolutely an essential element of any notion that we might go get towards the elimination of fatal and serious injury on the road. Ministers have endorsed a vision by 2050 of eliminating fatal injuries on Australia's roads. The college wants them to extend that vision to incorporate all serious injuries. It is inconceivable in my mind and in the mind of the college that this is possible without the provision of objective information about the safety of the roads which we are using. It's not as if this stuff is not known. In fact, in the National Road Safety Action Plan 2018 to 2020, you will find an outcome statement by 2020 that three-star AUSRAP ratings or better for 80% of travel on state roads and 90% of travel on national highways. I would be very interested to know what the current status of this performance measure is. And you may be interested simply to Google three-star AUSRAP ratings. It's quite instructive. What you find when you ask a basic question, how safe are the roads that Australian road users, consumers and taxpayers are available to them in their normal everyday course of business and activity. What you'll find actually is a whole series of things. You find Parliament is interested in it. You'll find researchers are interested in it. You'll find business interests interested in it. You'll find mobility clubs, such as my own, the RAA, interested in it. You'll actually occasionally find local government interest, and you'll also find some particular roads of interest, such as the Midland Highway in Tasmania. I'm very upfront about my own history in this. Of course, I'm not an engineer. I look at these things in terms of performance management. I don't really care about those engineering standards. They seem to have done a very good job of killing and maiming an awful lot of people for a very long time. I'm interested in performance, and that is the interest of the College of Road Safety. In the early 2000s, when I was working in New Zealand, I heard about the stuff that was happening in Europe, and what it was that the mobility clubs in Europe were saying we should be able to put a safety star rating on the roads that we use, just like we're starting to put safety star ratings on the vehicles that are being sold. And about 2004 and 2005, on one of my ventures over the ditch to Canberra, I called in on the AAA, and I said, "What are you actually? You're doing something here. What is it that you're doing? How is it that you're going about it?" And so in 2006, the first half of the year and the second half of the year, I came over to South Australia. In the first half of the year, I said, well, we really need something like this. We really need a road assessment program in New Zealand. And I'll draw your attention to the 5 bodies, brands down the bottom there. The picture is of the head of public policy of the New Zealand Automobile Association and the Minister of Everything at the time, Stephen Joyce. And what we did was we set up a collaborative process where the Highways Agency at the time, Transit New Zealand, said, yes, this looks like a good idea. We should provide people with information about the safety of the roads that are being used. And the AA obviously had connections into EuroRAP at that time, and obviously some of the very early learnings from AUSRAP in Australia. And so actually there was a collaborative picture of how we can provide New Zealanders with information about the safety of the roads that they use and pay for. And of course, there's now a long history. Now there are two types of people who, in my experience, over the last 2 decades, tend to be most willing to sort of quibble about things like AUSRAP or iRAP or any road assessment program really. One type tends to be the public servants who are responsible for delivering a safe road environment. They tend to be the people who ask questions, not too sure, why don't we investigate this, about the issue. Not really terribly keen on it, in my experience. The other is a bunch of people who, like me, they're consultants. Actually, what they want is they want to scoop up the next bunch of hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to develop the scheme that's really the best, instead of actually simply using this objective assessment mechanism, which has now been built up over all of the continents of the world in all different environments, whether it's local roads, highways, regional highways, etc. One of the big shocks for me when I got to South Australia was the level of opposition to AUSRAP at the time. And I remember going over with some colleagues to the Royal Automobile Club of Victoria, and we had a full discussion along with the AA people at the time, people who were doing Matt and Charles's job there, and we went through all of the details of AUSRAP at the time, and the answer to whether we could start making more use of this in South Australia was an outright blank, no negotiation, no. No, we can't use a mechanism for developing a safety star rating for the roads of South Australia. So what I did was I went to my colleagues in the Austroad Safety Task Force and I said, are you aware of what the level of opposition is to AUSRAP? This is a very negative environment here. And they said, yeah, no, they hate it. And they've said they want to do their own. Being a sort of an accommodating guy, I said, okay, well, we should give them some money to do it. Well, that was over 10 years ago. And we still don't have a safety star rating system which is made available to the users, consumers and taxpayers of Australia so that they know what the safety of the roads are in our country. A lot of time has passed on, and now we're here in 2020, and we still do not have any objective information available to anybody in Australia, certainly any community interests in Australia, about the safety of the roads which they use. Here's the graph that Chris was referring to. It's actually, what's the correlation? Now, Chris says it's a black box, and it certainly is. And it's the best black box that we've got. And so we need to start using it. And I'm quite upfront, as you can tell. There's no point in starting to reinvent some other wheel here. It's the iRAP system, which now needs to be applied and delivered by roads and traffic authorities right across the country. And that's been fully investigated, that black box, and these are the results. At every improvement in the star rating, there's about a halving of the crash costs on that road. It's pretty conclusive. The United Nations have established some voluntary road safety performance targets, and it covers all sorts of things. They're not the world's most technically correct set of road safety performance targets, but actually they've been endorsed by the United Nations as part of their 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Target 3 is that by 2030, all new roads achieve technical standards for all road users that take into account road safety or meet a 3-star safety rating or better. What we're struggling for now is to deliver a 3-star network for Australia's road users, consumers and taxpayers. Actually, the elimination goal that we have as a college, and which we share as a community of interest in road safety, is actually about a 5-star road. There's lots of different ways in which you can get to a 5-star road. And one of them is by dealing with speed limits. So I've visited the southeast a couple of times, and in the last few, it's been my sort of post-lockdown release, and it's been lovely. This is a photo. I couldn't quite believe it, but you know, I know it goes on. This is a photo I took in June. This is the road that runs off the road, which runs off the Princess Highway. It's the Southern Ports Highway. So if you're heading south from Kingston and you want to get to Cape Jaffa, you turn right onto this road, and this is what the user is confronted with. Let rip at 110, and if we didn't have a maximum speed limit, it would be an unlimited speed as well, like they have in the Northern Territory. This looks to me, now there might be some asset, and Russell might be able to comment, this looks to me like a perfectly maintained road.
Yeah, that looks brilliant.
Yeah.
Great texture, fantastic.
Thanks for your endorsement there, Russell. Obviously, it's absolutely lethal. And let's just leave aside which registered engineer signed off on the legal warrant to suggest that this was actually a reasonable speed limit to set on that road. Let's just leave that to one side. It is not possible, I don't think, to have a respectful discussion with rural communities particularly, but we can take this gross picture and translate it in a variety of ways into the urban environment for pedestrians and cyclists, etc. I can't see how it's possible to have a respectful discussion with regional communities in Australia about the safety of their roads until we actually start talking to them about actually what the safety of that road is. And the safety star rating provides us with that mechanism. It's not like it hasn't been done before. It's been done in the Bruce Highway in Queensland is a brilliant example of where the local mobility club worked with the Queensland government, and they actually did the whole thing. They did the before analysis, the after analysis, and they showed what can be achieved. They showed the shift in star ratings that are possible, and this is a great example of a cooperative approach. Actually, I believe that the mobility clubs have done their part. It's now actually the responsibility of the roads and traffic authorities to rate the safety of their roads and to provide users, consumers and taxpayers with objective information using an easily consumed risk star rating map, so that we can actually have a discussion about the safety of the roads that we use. I don't apologise for using all of this iRAP data and what have you. Anybody who thinks they've got a better safety assessment regime, tell them they're dreaming. Actually, this one, it's not just about, one of the great benefits of iRAP actually is that it deals with terrific uncertainty. So even in really low data environments, you can actually make quite conclusive judgments about what is unsafe and what is safe. This highway in Ghana, when I was doing my research for this, I came across this, that this is called the George W. Bush Highway. It is lethal and extraordinary. And I visited it in the 1-star period about 3 years ago. I went there, and they've now changed this La Paz intersection into a 4-star rated area. They can do it in Ghana. I think that we can do it in Australia. So I've only got 2 more slides. The first one is a really old one. It's from 2013. And what it is the distribution of star ratings by state and territories on the National Highway Network. And we can see the results of that there. There's 2% is 5-star. And oh no, it's not 2%, it's 2% of their network. That's 0% 5-star, 8% 4-star, 39% are 1 and 2-star. I think that we could probably do something about those roads. I'm not sure what you think. The mobility clubs of Australia and New Zealand and around the world have done an extraordinary job and gifted us an extraordinary asset. And that is an objective and easily understood assessment of the safety of the road. It's now time that the roads and traffic authorities do their part. These are the most up-to-date figures being published by iRAP of vehicle occupant, motorcyclist, pedestrian and cyclist safety star ratings in Australia. So this is all of Australia. And I suppose what I'd like to know is, where are all these 1 and 2-star roads? Which ones are they? Are they the ones that I'm using or my family is using? I'd be a bit concerned about that. What can be done and what is being done to eliminate these 1 and 2-star? Because I don't think that's a good idea. Actually, the United Nations say that the target for countries is to achieve 3 stars. We've got quite a lot of 1 and 2 stars. We should think about how we can get rid of those 1 and 2-star roads, I think. Why is this essential public safety information actually unavailable to the public? It seems like we can produce an awful lot of data in an awful quick time when you look at the COVID response over the last 6 months. Why aren't we making information available about the safety of the roads that we use? Why is that? How can we possibly realise zero without this essential public safety information? People talk about engaging the community and having conversations and really getting into the understanding of what people's motivations, what people want to do, what people will accept. Actually, that's all just a load of hooey, unless actually people are provided with some objective information about the safety of the roads that they're being used. It's a public management failure of the highest order that this information is still not available to the road users, consumers and taxpayers of Australia. I'd go further and say it's a public management disgrace. Road authorities should be collecting this information, making it easily available for people and talking with people about how they will eliminate fatal and serious injury on their road. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you very much, Martin. It's a well-argued and clearly articulated request for more transparency. We do have a pile of questions coming in. So the first one's from Noel, who says, have politicians been weaned off black spot to star rating?
No, engineers haven't been weaned off black spots and onto star ratings. It's a massive ongoing issue. I don't actually believe that roads and traffic authorities are actually, there must be something wrong within the processes in roads and traffic authorities that we're not hearing about these safety star ratings. There must be something significantly wrong. And until roads and traffic authorities actually deal with that issue themselves, there's no hope of asking politicians to do that. When politicians are asked about this thing, they talk about maintenance. They talk about maintenance budgets. In fact, the Infrastructure South Australia strategy says that, as the figure here, 74% of the statewide road network is 1 and 2 stars. And the Infrastructure South Australia strategy says that that will be fixed by maintenance programs. Well, you know, something hasn't worked within the roads and traffic authorities when those sorts of statements can be made, because there's no way that a maintenance program will do anything other than maintain the current level of death and serious injury. It's not a politician's problem, it's a roads and traffic authorities problem.
Okay, I think that's a good segue to our next question from Scott, who says, New Zealand Transport has created a dedicated fund for highway safety works. Has this made a difference? Can we achieve safe system on Australian highways without dedicated funding, as opposed to one-off announcements?
Very good question. I don't think that we can. I think that there's a lot of stuff that's being talked about you know, we'll put in this money here, and every single dollar that's gone into the road network is achieving a safety outcome. It just so happens that we've had this dreadful slump in performance, and all these people are still being killed and seriously injured. I think that it's pretty conclusive that there needs to be dedicated, safety-focused money that can be put into infrastructure programs and put forward into a pot where the community can discuss what their priorities are. Now, that road off to Cape Jaffa, a side road off a secondary highway, or you know, Southern Ports Highway, I understand, it's not the Prince's Highway. That road off a road, that's an access road. Goodness knows what that's doing at 110 kilometres an hour and being maintained in that condition. And you can't actually have a respectful discussion with people in regional communities in Australia without putting some money on the table, because they know the truth. They actually do know the truth. They know that these roads are substandard. And unless you put some money on the table as you discuss the speed limit issue, you're never going to get anywhere, I don't think.
Thanks. So Rob asks, how can we get around the political and bureaucratic systems that can impact adversely on road safety initiatives?
Well, I'll just say from a college perspective, you know, we're all in the early stages of the development of a new national road safety strategy, and I know in South Australia there are steps underway to develop a state strategy. What the college is doing is trying to be very clear about a small number of priorities. And so how we're trying to get around it is just by saying very clear, repeatedly, we need publicly available, easily consumable safety star ratings of the road network. And how that happens, we're quite happy to discuss. I've said to more than one chief executive, you release the ratings and we'll say thank you very much. We'll say thank you very much. This is very important, essential public safety information that you're providing here, and we'd be very interested in engaging in a very positive discussion about what can be done with this information. So a no blame environment, but insistence. This is only one of only half a dozen things that we're asking for in the national strategy.
Yes. So Phil asks, well, he says, great advocacy, Martin. Says, I understand iRAP inputs are very detailed and seek data every 100 metres. Could a perception of high data collection costs be a barrier for road authorities adopting iRAP? And can this be alleviated? For example, federal funding to help with data collection costs or aggregation of similar road segments.
Yeah, I think if there is actually a serious response to this issue of the provision of essential public safety information, that there's going to have to be some consideration of how this is going to go. This is going to go about. Actually, I think probably there needs to be some ongoing program, including some national component. I mean, each roads and traffic authority has to do its own bit. But there has to be some national consistency across the board, and that probably needs some money and its own governance, because it can't be left to the roads and traffic authorities, because they've shown themselves unwilling to deliver safety star rating information to users, consumers and taxpayers. So yeah, there has to be some sort of breakthrough like that at a national level. The detail, I think the sort of 100-metre thing and the high data requirement stuff, I'd see that as being detailed. There's a lot of progress that can be made very quickly, I'm sure.
Okay, so I think sort of related to that, Daniel asks if the RAA and other clubs around Australia have done iRAP. Why is that data not available?
Good question. I think actually that what the mobility clubs have tended to do is stay on very best terms with the roads and traffic authorities, because they know they won't get any data unless they act nicely. There's going to need to be a way of transitioning that responsibility. It's not the responsibility of the mobility clubs to be delivering this service. This is essential public safety information, and is able to be delivered within a proper consumer-oriented governance mechanism. It's going to have to be delivered by the roads and traffic authorities.
Indeed. Catherine asks, internationally, how much do other countries make this data available publicly?
Yeah, good question. So there has been some fits and starts in New Zealand. I did the strategy review in New Zealand about 5 years ago, and was very critical that they hadn't kept on publishing the safety star ratings. They've done some other things, like they have, for example, they've done a massive dump which periodically is picked up in the media, which shows, you know, that by any reasonable safety rating standard, the speed limits are too high on sort of, you know, 80% of their roads, or this sort of thing. So they've sort of done more like a dump thing. I think actually what we need to do now in Australia is go for gold. What we want is something which is nationally consistent, that everybody in every state can see how safe is this road that I'm going to be driving on and my family is driving on every day, and what does that mean about how we can make that safer. Highways England has been very good. So in New Zealand, there is a performance measure that's been set in their strategy at the end of last year for safety star ratings. Highways England has been the best one so far in consistently putting itself forward as requiring, making itself accountable for the safety star ratings on its roads. And it's not like it's not happening in Australia. That Queensland has consistently referencing 3-star safety or safety star ratings, but it's not nearly sufficient. There's no way that we can see inside that black box and see what it's like. If I'm going to Broken Hill, how safe is that road? I don't know. I know there's money being tipped into it, but I've got no insight as to actually how safe it is. I should be able to just look that up. That's very easy on an app. to see what the safety star rating is. So it's not like those things haven't happened at all, but it's nowhere near what is needed, and it's nowhere close to what's required for us to get to zero.
Charles says, thanks, great presentation, Martin. Is there an appetite federally to mandate states to release star ratings so that we get a national picture that can be used as a starting point for future road safety programs?
Well, let's hope so. I certainly, when I appeared at the Joint Select Committee on Road Safety on Monday last week, we referenced this need in our submission to them, and I was asked about it by one of the members, and my hope is that knowledge will keep on building. The senator asked whether this is information that somebody in their family might be able to look up before they go on holiday. I said yes. It's also information that a person controlling a business unit who's responsible for the safety of employees and bystanders in work-related travel can do as well. What's the relative safety of different routes to and from this job, for example? So it's happening extraordinarily slowly, way too slowly. Actually, we need to transform how we think about the safety of the road, and the safety star ratings are the way to do it.
Okay, thank you, Martin. We do have a few more questions, but what we will do is that we can pass those on to the presenters afterwards, and they can get back to you via email. I would like to thank all our presenters for coming along and sharing their time and perspectives. Thank all the audience members for coming along. I think we hit about almost 50 attendees at one point, so thanks very much. I know it's a really nice day in Adelaide today, so thanks for coming along. As I say, we'll send the details of the presenters, so do feel free to contact them. They're happy for you to do that. We'll make this presentation available as well, and please drive safely and enjoy your weekend. Cheers.